Good afternoon. My name is Nathalya Acosta, a student from Seminar 6, and this is my research poster. Conflict resolution, going beyond the desk, is a research proposal aimed to understand students' voices in regards to impacts of conflicts in their personal and academic performance. Colombia has been considered one of the most violent countries in Latin America. Under these lights, conflicts are also daily situations presented in educational context which affect individuals inside the language class. Different types of actions take place in classrooms, and students, even if they are not directly involved with the struggles, feel the consequences, such as lack of motivation, social isolation, and low attention. So the current project addresses impacts of the normalization of violence and power relations on human beings immersed in the educational act, as well as the development of strategies based on materials adaptation. In this moment, Colombia is crossing one of the most relevant episodes of its history. The peace agreements that have been created with the purpose of overcoming national issues were supposed to be an opportunity for families in the country to grow and leave behind the fear and suffering that started last century, fact that we put in tension these days given the conditions of the supposed post-conflict stage. However, violence not only comprises what we have learned about our country in history lessons, or what we have suffered in the most affected areas of the nation. It also starts in local contexts with attitudes, words, and thoughts. In pedagogical contexts, sometimes violent acts are being perpetuated, and we as educators are not prepared to face daily conflicts that affect children in physical as well as mental issues. To introduce this project, I will start by contextualizing this proposal, which emerged as a humanistic concern that puzzled me during the pedagogical practicum developed with children aged 7 and 9 years old in 2018. I started to be worried about fights and struggles presented when different kinds of activities took place in the ELC classroom. This could be evidenced when students tended to interrupt the learning process by diverse demeanors, such as rude actions, the use of pejorative words, and violent attitudes to address others. Many situations demand special attention since their consequences can affect negatively the individual. Then, this will be reflected in the educational context as well as other aspects of children's personal lives. Generally, we tend to ignore student interests, necessities, or problems, and children will feel the pressure of working in what they should, leaving aside their troubles and assuming they are not relevant. For that reason, situated as a pre-service English teacher educator of a public institution immersed in a human relationship, I attempt to understand the impact of conflict resolution strategies in second graders at a district school, and the implications in their personal and educational performance that might affect them in detrimental senses. To address this research proposal, I will be working under the eclectic framework, considering different Colombian contexts in which conflicts and aggressions can be part of daily situations. It is not just a matter of students immersed in the language class. Teachers' practices and other social relationships might give an account of our reality where violence is implicitly integrated in our culture. The image we build of others and the way we resignify the value of other human beings with whom we interact has to do with listening and understanding their personal experiences that shape their way of being and relate with others. In that sense, the research question stated from the context is: what do second graders' responses reveal about the impact of conflicts in the ELC classroom throughout strategies when adapting materials? In addition, the research objectives stated for this proposal are to observe and analyze the impact of conflicts and violent situations in individuals' lives and academic performance, to reflect upon normalization of violence within the educational act, to plan adequately and ethically an instructional design in accordance to students' interests, needs, and opinions, to act in favor of the good environment and have a positive impact on students throughout the implementation of pertinent strategies. Consequently, with the question and the objectives established for this proposal, the following part will be integrated by two main structures: the research design and the instructional design. I'm going to start with the first one. My research design starts in the research paradigm. Social studies such as violence and conflicts presented in the EFL classroom are matter of interest of everyone in the society. Taking into account that the core of this study is the students' responses and the implementation of materials adaptation, we must be aware about populations' personal experiences as individuals immersed in situations that generate conflicts. Under this light, considering that qualitative inquirers use this study as a broad explanation for behavior and attitudes, and it may be complete with variables, constructs, and hypotheses, this is an excerpt taken from Creswell 2014, the implementation of qualitative research in this study is pertinent in order to analyze and take part of the conflictive situations with the purpose of understanding social demeanors presented in EFL classes. In accordance with the selected paradigm, the research method that I find most appropriate for the development of my proposal lands in the action research. This, in accordance with Chemis and Mack 1988, as you can see in the poster representation, is aimed to keep working on practice with the purpose of reflecting, redesigning, and rethinking in the pedagogical practice improvement. The action in local problems is the main basis of this study. The researcher collects data, analyzes situations, and implements changes in the academic practice. This proposal will reflect upon the social conflicts presented at the schools, the students' responses in front of violent acts, and the correct execution of strategies that might contribute with children in their pedagogical performance. To conclude with my research design section, I will talk about the data collection instruments. It is pertinent to clarify that these instruments were implemented for the statement of this research problem. Nevertheless, those are going to be the same during the data analysis after the implementation of the project. 1. Observation. Creswell defines observation as the most frequent method used to collect qualitative data. It allows researchers to gather information by analyzing the behavior of the target population in some specific context. Considering that observation do not just imply what can be perceived with the eyes, but all the things that are brought to the senses, throughout the use of this data collection instrument, there can be analyzed easily some attitudes and behaviors that the target population has in front of the multiple strategies to be developed in context. The observation in this proposal could be evidenced through field notes. 2. Journals. Maxwell states that a journal is a forum of reflections where ideas and discoveries are generated and explored through writing. These methods allows an instructive insight into specific aspects of the research process and help researchers to record reflective processes which occur during every stage of the study. Teachers' journals are a valuable instrument in this study since it allows to obtain some specific information about reflections, thoughts, and ideas in the pedagogical context that might help in the understanding of attitudes, behaviors, and students' decisions in class. 3. Students' artifacts. All the products and creations of students are worthy in the development of this study. It doesn't matter the exercise developed in class, the production of students will provide information about the way in which they perceive conflicts and how the strategies are helping them to overcome the normalization of violence. These pieces of work were collected to evidence students' growth during the implementation. On the other hand, the second part of this poster has to do with the instructional design. It leads us to analyze the curricular platform at the moment of implementing materials adaptation and collective experiences to understand normalization of violence within educational spaces. This curricular platform is composed by 3 general visions and 1 specific option to teach, learn, and research in the same space, keeping in mind the purpose of this research proposal. These are the visions of language, visions of learning, and visions of classroom, along with the didactic choice to carry out in the project. The visions of language I have adopted for the proposal is the language as culture and ideology, stated by Tudor in 2001. In this, the language is used to express culture and worldview. It allows teachers and learners to interact with others under a socio-cultural dimension. Language fosters knowledge of external realities and cultural practices which affect everyday communication. The vision of learning is the role of affect. In this matter, some authors have stated the interaction that involves and is influenced by certain psychological, cognitive, and experiential factors. In this sense, in the language classroom, I can detect positive affective predisposition towards the language and along with their classmates in peer interaction. It is certain that this factor influences positive or negative the learning process, so the role of affect allows us also to perceive others under a humanistic framework. The vision of the classroom is the space for socialization proposed by Tudor. Since schools are also conceived as social institutions within the EFL classes, peer interaction is crucial to understand ways to socialize and understand dynamics of violence and conflicts inside the school. The didactic choice or teaching methodology to be implemented is taken from the 10 macro strategies proposed by Kumaravadivelu on his post method. For this proposal, I have chosen 4 principles. Facilitate negotiated interaction. Promote learner autonomy. Raise cultural consciousness. Ensure social relevance. These principles will be the root at the moment of developing sessions and adapting materials along with all people involved in this study. To conclude this presentation, due to the fact that I have not carried out my research project, I have stated some preliminary tensions and preliminary conclusions that I might find during the development of this research. Among the preliminary tensions, one of the first things I consider can be problematic is related to the pedagogical strategies and didactic materials adaptation, since they cannot be focused on students' needs and interests at the same time. In this case, it is more suitable to analyze what is most suitable thing to do based on students' interactions and perceptions. The second tension I found is the fact of coming up with preliminary assumptions instead of facts. It means to think about how can I intervene within the pedagogical environment because I assume that there is a problem, rather than analyzing context and listening to student voices. The next tension has to do with the amount of participants involved in this proposal. As you could see, I will be working together with 32nd graders at a district school. Nevertheless, I didn't want to exclude any of them since each one, and as an ethical commitment, should be given the possibility to express their opinion and attitudes towards the topic. And finally, my last concern is about the lack of innovation while adapting materials. To finish, in regards to my preliminary conclusions, I think beyond a conceptualization about the consequence of conflicts in students' lives, conflict resolution is oriented towards the understanding of voices and the power of dialogue as a possibility for building relationships. The dynamics of interaction in the classroom might change focus on the students and their immediate necessities, instead of being focused on obsolete contexts that are imposed by educational policies and laws. I consider the manners and the way we relate with others is much more important even when in the environment there are focuses for the development of conflicts such as the power relationships inside the pedagogical act. Thanks for watching, and I await feedback or suggestions to carry out my research proposal.